Hi, welcome to the Meeting of Minds podcast. I'm Philippa, and today I have with me the wonderful Helen Ferguson. So Helen is a trauma psychotherapist, and I found Helen earlier this year when I was looking for podcasts and live events to guest on, and I actually found Helen because I was looking at somebody else who was a guest on Helen's Facebook Live. So anyway, it was a little bit convoluted, but I ended up getting in touch with Helen, and we did a Facebook Live in Helen's Facebook group back in June now. That's like half a year ago, which I did I loved, although I was feeling really quite tender that day, which was quite interesting. But Helen's kind and supportive way with me that day really touched me. And I've followed her since then. And I love everything about the way she talks about healing, her integrity, her knowledge, and her warmth. So, Helen has 20 years experience of liberating people from their trauma and helping them heal. She has moved from directly helping children in the moment to helping the wounded child in women who have experienced their own trauma. Her website says, whenever I am holding you safely in your healing journey, I am also holding the hand of that inner child. And together we bring her peace and freedom. I love so much about what Helen talks about and stands for. And it gives me great pleasure, Helen, to welcome you to the podcast.
Oh, I'm absolutely so excited to be here. And I finally, after several kind of, can we rearrange? I'm sorry. Yeah. But it is fantastic to be here. And I'm really touched actually by what you said about how kind of held you felt in the conversation with me in my life. And that's exactly the way, that's exactly the way I live my life. If you're my friend, I hold you. If you're my client, I hold you. If there's a relationship or a connection with me, it feels very held and safe. So I'm glad that part of me actually came across in the connection that you had with me on that day. So
it absolutely did. And actually I'd forgotten until now that I also messaged you not in between then and now, asking you for some resources around self-harm and things, and that really helped. You pointed me in a direction that really helped me find out stuff that really helped the situation that I needed to put some help into. So you're just you're just one of those really warm, but not but warm and what's the word? You don't mess about, do you? You say it as it is.
You say it. I say it how it is. Yeah. And I think there's often a kind of misconception about kind of psychotherapists and therapists that we kind of beat around the bush a bit, that we won't say to people how the reality of it. And actually it's hugely important to me and anybody that I work with. And it's that actually I let them know how it is, because in my own healing and recovery journey over the years, that's what I've needed, is just that kind of, that clear and clarity of understanding.
Yeah.
And not feeling as though I'm being led down a particular path and not understanding it. So, in any healing and recovery, you've got to, and any relationship with somebody that's helping you with that, there's got to be that clarity of understanding of why are we doing this, Helen? Why are we doing it this way, Helen? What's this all about? But it's also, in my own healing and recovery, and from my own history of trauma, it was really important to me to not, I didn't re-find her, she hadn't disappeared completely, but to allow the calm, confident, courageous, slightly fierce, strong, empowered woman to be at the forefront of who I am. And that is who I am. And I can be compassionate and empathic and all of those things. But at the same time, I also recognize my own courage and my own strength and my own my own empowered sense of being. And that's exactly what I want anybody and everyone to feel, especially if they've experienced trauma.
Yeah, and that makes so much sense. That's how that's what I experience from what I've seen of you. I mean, granted, I don't know you a huge amount, but I feel like I know you a bit, and I see your posts that you do, and I have spent time in your presence, and that's very much my experience of you. And I love the word that your use of the word fierce, but like not fierce in like fierce,
not,
but
not
yeah, exactly. It's like strong and yeah, I yeah, you really, I found that really inspiring.
I think there's, I remember I was having a conversation with a good friend of mine. She's like my soul sister. She's somebody I've known since I was 14, and she remembers me when I was 14. And I had to do something for a rebrand that's happening. So I'm having a website redesign and blah, blah, blah. And that lady was saying to me, describe yourself, Helen. And I was like, oh gosh, hang on. And so I actually got in touch with my friend Mandy and just said, what would you say? What I know some of the words that I'd use about myself, but what would you say about me? And she said, I remember you at 14 being so self-assured, so contained, but in a good way, that you had a real sense of who you were and your identity and your strengths. And she said, I've never seen that in a young person before. Mandy's 6 years older than me. So she said, I'd never seen that. And she said, but it was like this real presence of it. And so when I experienced my own relational trauma, so domestic violence and abuse, that part of me was stifled. And so when I think about every aspect of moving through that experience and moving beyond that experience, it was about saying to that part of me, it's okay to come back. You can be self-assured. It's not arrogance. It's not, you can be fierce, and it's not aggressiveness, and it's not anger. It's actually owning these terms as a woman and these feelings and ways of being as a woman that aren't seen as negative, but actually owning them and saying fierce. You can be gentle and fierce.
Yeah.
You can be compassionate and fierce. You can be empathic and fierce.
Yeah.
You can be self-assured and not be arrogant with it. You can be self-assured and it not be anger,
Yeah.
But there were lots of different words that were used about me. Like, oh, isn't she angry? Isn't she aloof? Isn't she this? And that's just the kind of, misconception that people had of me at that time.
Right.
That was labeling me in a way that fit with their term, their understanding of those ways of being, rather than my understanding of those ways of being.
Yes.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, actually, I'm going to use fierce more often. I like that word. You've reintroduced me to the word fierce. I like that. But you make a very good point that a lot of it is down to interpretation, isn't it? And we don't like work things out sometimes for ourselves enough. And we can, if somebody said to me, oh, this person is, I don't know, for instance, aloof, they might mean one thing by aloof, and I might take that as something else. And before you know it, there's a whole sort of lot of misconception going on there. And I might go, oh, they're a bit aloof. I've heard they're aloof. I'm not going to have anything to do with them. Whereas actually they might be a brilliant fit for me, because they might, for whatever reason, we might connect. And it's just we throw words out all the time, don't we? And we throw terms around all the time. And actually, how much notice do we take of those rather than working things out for ourselves or finding things out for ourselves? I think
exactly, because it's often like you say, it's the perception that people have of those terms and those words, and also how they've been used in the past. So you think about people saying about or rewriting their story and redefining their story. It's also about owning the words that you would use about yourself, owning the strengths that you have of yourself, and and also helping other people understand and rewrite the terminology too.
Yeah.
So, you know, when I say I'm fierce, you know, there's some people that would kind of feel a little bit threatened by that. And I think that's not about, you know, that's not about, oh, I'm going to beat somebody up. I'm not going to do that. But, you know, but I think it's also about, you know, I've had some women say to me, I feel threatened by that because I don't know how to be that and feel safe with it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I don't know how to be self-assured and self-confident and be safe in that in myself, and then safe in that in the relationships that are around me. Because other people will then say, oh, you're acting differently. You know,
yes.
all those things. This isn't you. Well, actually, it is. You know, it is you. And it's okay to be you. And it's okay to own all of those parts of you, all of those descriptions of you. So if you think of yourself as having confidence and having, you know, high self-esteem and you know, and feeling safe in yourself, then own that. I was at a network meeting, a business network meeting in Paris a couple of weekends ago, and we were just describing, you know, our backgrounds, what we do. And I was coming to the end of my piece, and I said, and you know what? I love myself. And I really want everybody to love themselves too.
Yeah.
And I said, there's nothing arrogant about that. But I love who I am. I love the person that I am.
Yeah.
And gosh, isn't it absolutely wonderful to be able to say that and to own it? And so having people be able to get to that point when they work with me, or even if they're friends with me, you know, then is an extraordinary thing. And you know, I think it's an important, you know, loving yourself with respect and dignity and a complete kind of understanding of who you are is an incredible thing.
It is. It is. And I love that. And also, I have found myself saying a lot lately, I love myself. And I never have done, ever, really. I certainly wasn't a self-assured 14-year-old that I needed to tease out again. I think I froze really early on. But I can say that now. I still have this little, I always have to follow it up with a, not in a, oh, I think I'm brilliant sort of way, but I do genuinely love who I am. And that's given me a great, I call it a solidity. I feel like I've got this sort of solid rod running through me now that I didn't have before. So
if you've got a solid rod,
yeah.
stops a bit afterwards that has to justify why you're saying yourself.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly. So I could just solidify it a little bit more, but you know, it's all a work in progress. And
we're all that. We're all that.
We absolutely are, because once you start, there's no end point, is there?
There's no end point. There's no end point.
No. And you know, when I came out of therapy after 3 years, I no way thought that I was finished, but I thought I'm okay for now. And then, of course, what did I do? I started my own business, which is absolutely a whole other, like, you know, let's trigger all these other things here now. So yeah, it's always a work in progress. I loved the you know, you talk about the inner child a lot, and you know, I think that's why I resonate with I love so much of what you say, because I feel that going in and finding my inner child and loving her and giving her the things that she didn't get when she was little and reintegrating with her has been the most defining point of my therapy. And I mean, I understood that whole inner child thing. I don't know why, but I did. But I think it's quite a difficult thing sometimes for people to kind of get their head around. And since this is what you do, I wondered if have you got a way of explaining that
I think so.
Cool. I'd love to hear it, please.
Well, I think it's important, firstly, to understand that you know, whenever anybody talks to you about the inner child and kind of connecting with your inner child, it's not you know, when you're doing any inner child healing or inner child therapy, you know, lots of my clients I do inner child visualization and guided visualization with, and it's about remembering that you're not going back to be that child. You are meeting that child as the adult self that you are now. And so if you can understand it in that way, it takes away some of the fear of, oh my God, I'm going back to that space, that time, that person, that feeling of when I was scared, when somebody was hurting me, when something was happening that I didn't understand. So if you can acknowledge that you've got yourself now, and you have layers of you that are at different times in your life, but ultimately there's a little one that needs you to meet them, that needs you as your adult self, the one that's got through so much, the one that has survived and is working through now into kind of rising above all of the trauma that you've experienced. But she needs to know that she's safe. So unless you meet her and help her feel safe, she's not going to feel it. So in inner child healing and inner child therapy, doing that inner child journey work is not about going back to the trauma, but going back and meeting the child and just guiding them out of it. Yeah. So bringing them to a sense of safety. And I suppose that, if I think about it from my own perspective, I've done my own inner child healing work. And I think, you can never stop doing it, because there's always going to be times in your life, that remind you of times or periods in your life where things were difficult. And when I did mine, I met my 16-year-old self, actually, who had, just kind of a fraction of time being different, would not have met the person that then hurt her quite significantly. Yes. So actually, when I did my own inner child visualization, I don't do it on myself. I had somebody help me do that. Actually, what I did was I went to that space in time that meant that I just got in between and stood and protected her.
Oh, yeah.
And basically said, you've done your harm. You need to go now. And I just turned to her and I held her. And I let her know it's okay. You are still a part of me. You're safe now. And actually that's the part that allowed the self-assured and the confident and the self-contained Helen to feel safe enough to be back in this body here.
Yes.
Adult self.
Yeah.
So always remember, it's never a going back to that point in time as that child. It's you going back as your adult self with everything that you've learned and everything that you've got through, to bring love, dignity, and respect and safety to that child that was you at a point in time, because it's never going to come from anyone else. So if you were not parented with emotional safety, if you weren't parented with safety, you're not going to receive that from your parents. So it has to come from you. So it's a reparenting, if you like, of that part of you, that little one. I have a little one here. I always have a little one at hand.
Oh, cute.
Yeah. So she's in there.
Yeah.
And if she's been hurt, if she's not been looked after, if she's not felt safe, then you can't ask that of anybody else now, because it's not going to come from anybody else. It's not going to come from any new relationship, any new partner, any validation, external validation of success in business or success in professional life. It's not going to come from that. It's going to come from the relationship that you have with her and how you meet her and how you help her feel safe. Does that answer your question?
It does beautifully. Okay. It does beautifully. Yes, thank you. And yes, your loads of points to pick up on there, but the most important one actually for me is that we have to do it for ourselves.
Yeah.
Because and there can be grief around the reality that the parents are never going to be the parents that I definitely had to work on my grief around the relationship with my parents. Was never going to be what I actually needed. But, you know, the main point of it was giving that little part of me that was really quite young when it all went wrong, you know, I'd say 5, and giving her what she needed. And that included, I've said this loads of times on the podcast before, you know, I bought myself a cuddly toy, and I slept with that cuddly toy for three months, and it occasionally still comes out. It has, I don't think it's been out for quite, it might not have been out all this year actually, but it occasionally comes out. But you know, it's what I needed in that moment, to know that the adult me was keeping all parts of me safe.
Yeah. And always remember that there's the wounded inner child, but there's also the other inner child that is playful, that wants to come out to play, that feels, you know, that I call her the puddle jumper because I like jumping puddles. So, you know, you let her out to play too, you know, or him or they.
Yeah, exactly. Whoever it is. Yeah.
Whoever it is, let them out to play, you know. And because that also is, they're also a part of you.
Yeah.
You know, we can be serious. We can get into, I mean, I'm, you know, I think I'm quite serious in therapy, and then my clients turn around and say they didn't realize they were going to have so much fun in therapy as well.
Oh, now that's a new one.
That's a new one. Yes, there's a trauma psychotherapist saying that you have fun in therapy, but we do. We have a laugh. We get playful, and I think it's really important to tap into your playful side. Because when you, not the jokey, not joking about what's happened to you, but being playful with yourself. Because when you're playful with yourself, you allow a relaxing, you bring this down, and you allow yourself to just ease into this playful relationship with yourself. That is jumping in puddles. There is reading The Magic of the Faraway Tree from Charles.
Yes.
There is just really connecting with everything that used to bring you joy and can still bring you joy.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Because that part that will help the wounded inner child to feel safer in that relationship.
Yeah. And for me, there, you know, I feel my inner child, my very young inner child, there's so much wisdom there actually, because she knew before I started playing all the roles that everybody else wanted me to play, she knew what was good for me, and I'd completely kind of forgotten about all that. So yeah, I'm busy having a massive regression. Most days you can see me wearing dungarees and pigtails. It's like my full regression to my 5-year-old has really sort of, you know, I'm embracing her. Let's put it that way.
I think, you know, I think it's important to even when you feel like you have to be serious. Now I do a serious job. You know, I actually kind of think of it as a life purpose, not a job, actually. But it's serious, obviously, and you know, I hold a lot of pain for people, and being an intuitive empath as well, I kind of that absorbs. So I have to do things that also help me be able to release that from me. But at the same time, I'm also fun. I'm also slightly weird and a bit quirky. You know, I have a thing about mugs, for example. You know, there's a whole different story in itself. But you know, I also stopped playing the roles that other people expected of me. I stopped. And that was true boundary kind of setting for me. Connecting really with my values and my I call it you know, your gravitational pull in your orbit, you know, so you're a planet and you've got your gravitational pull. I got clear on my values. I got clear on connecting those with my boundaries, but also I got very clear on who I was, who I am, and who I am and who I will be for other people, rather than who they think I should be. And that's also what I help. I work predominantly with women. I do work occasionally with men, but and that's not for any other reason than sometimes men just don't want to work with women, you know. But then they find Helen and they go, oh, I want to work with you. That's right. You know, so I predominantly work with women, and I predominantly work with women who are entrepreneurs, who are business owners, who are professionals. So they have all these roles, they have all these external expectations of how they're supposed to be. And actually, what I do is I, you know, through all the process with me is I say, well, actually, who is it that you want to be? Who is it that because you can't show up in your business and in your entrepreneurial life as somebody who you're not. You've got to show up as you, and it changes the whole perspective of how you turn up in your working life, in your business, in your business owner role, in whatever role that you have, because you're not turning up showing up for other people. You're turning up and showing up for yourself, all parts of yourself that then mean that people get the best out of you, and you're in your own lane. You don't have to be in any. I've always said I've never been in anyone's lane. I was the child at school, the young person at school that wasn't part of a gang. I wasn't part of a group. I wasn't, I had a small handful of friends. I still only have a small handful of friends. I kind of dip into the social aspects of things, and then I'm like, oh, that's lovely, thank you very much. I'm going to go back on my own and read my book. But giving yourself permission to just be and validate yourself for who you are, and not how you think other people expect you to be, is hugely empowering. And that's also healing.
It is.
That's healing, is saying, I'm not going to do all of that, because it doesn't fit with who I am, and it doesn't fit with how I want to be in the world, and it doesn't fit with how I want to live my life. And actually, what it feels is really oppressive sometimes. Once you free yourself from that, and you say to yourself, I'm going to actually turn up today as me in every single aspect of my life as much as I possibly can, then you take ownership. Then you're free. Then you're, quote unquote, from my clients, liberated.
Yes.
And you get to just be you, and then take her through to the next phase of your life.
Yeah, I love hearing it. I'm like mesmerized. I'm sort of like listening to you and thinking, because that's very much been my journey. So I love to hear it. I love to hear it from other people as well, other women mainly. Because we can take on all these roles, and we can certainly take on what we think we should be doing and what people expect of us. And for me, I found that one of the hardest times was when I'd finished therapy, and I was like, okay, but now what? I've okay, so I now realize how much my childhood has impacted my adulthood. I now understand a lot more about my behavior. I now wonder, okay, but now what? How do I live now? And that was a whole of and that's kind of what's brought me to where I am now, because it's almost the moving forward. And how do I do that? And it's not about reinventing myself. It was about teasing out who I really am. Because and that's when I found out, under this layer of, I sort of talk about, for me, it felt like the layer of trauma was sort of taken off. Not that it ever goes away, but I've taken off the heaviness of that trauma. And that's when I discovered I'm an HSP, and that's when I discovered how intuitive I am and how creative I am, and all those other parts of me that had just never had any space to breathe.
And I like to think of it as, and I actually describe it a lot as kind of rising beyond trauma.
Yes.
Not just above it, not just, but rising beyond it, because you're not just moving beyond it, you're going beyond it, but you're rising.
Yes.
Well. And it's, it doesn't mean that trauma defines the rest of your life. You can acknowledge that it's happened. I actually, when people say to me, well, what's your story? And I'm kind of like, I'm a bit reluctant to kind of tell the story of my trauma history, because that's not who I am now.
Yes, I get that.
And so and it's not a reluctance of, I don't think anybody'd like to hear it. It's more of, is that who I am?
Yeah.
Because I'd much rather be the inspiration as the woman that I am now than the one who was in that place at that time. But it's almost like, I completely understand that people want to see that change can happen.
Yes.
Want to see that they don't have to feel the way that they're feeling right now. And I absolutely get that. But I also want anybody that works with me, anybody listening, to actually also kind of understand that you don't have to sit in that story. it's not your, it's not your story, it's
Yeah.
the story of what somebody did to you, what the experience was, but your story is also you here now.
Yeah.
And that is the one that you get to start writing from a different place.
Yeah.
And so when I look back at that, about 16, 17, 18, 19-year-old, 20-year-old young woman, I kind of go, who was that?
Yeah.
Because she's certainly not who I am now. And what she was the expectation and the definition of what somebody else had been doing to her.
Yeah.
Rather than who she is.
Yeah.
And that's a vast difference. So whenever, when I talk about that rising beyond trauma, it's that. It's being able to see and understand yourself in this present moment and who you are becoming, recognizing that story of what happened to you is not something that has to live with you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And that, thank you for sharing that. And that is the reason why I like to have these conversations, because I think I didn't know until I lost the sight in my eye at 47. I genuinely did not understand how much my childhood had impacted. And I was 47, for Christ's sake, and any idea of personal development, inner child. I mean, I had some counselling a little bit over the years, but only in very sporadic patches, and not with anybody. I was going to say not with anybody good. That's harsh. I wasn't in the right place. No. So, and I like to have conversations in case there are people listening who are like me, who didn't know, who didn't know that maybe the way things are perhaps because of things that have happened in the past. Usually are because of things happening in the past. And also change is possible. Change absolutely is possible, if you want it.
Yeah, you have to, there's not most of the women that I work with, whenever they first start to work with, they know that something's missing. They know that something isn't right. They've tried all the other stuff. So they've tried doing all the courses. They've tried doing all the things for their business. They've tried doing all the all the kind of high-end kind of business coaching stuff to try and get validation. So the whole kind of lot of things that people will do, and then they realize, oh, actually no, there's still something. And there's still something is them. And so that's not to disrespect anybody that does obviously invest in courses and things like that. I mean, that's not about that, but it's more about stop looking that way.
Yeah. Stop looking outside.
Looking here.
Yeah.
Look inside. When you do, I know it's scary. I know it's like, oh no, hang on, I have to actually notice that I'm feeling this.
Yeah.
Oh, it is me. And then, of course, when you say that statement of, oh gosh, it is me, then of course it links in with the shame that you already have of what's happened to you. So then there's another block that happens. But remember that the it's me is also the acknowledgement that you want things to be different.
Yeah.
And that you don't want to feel this way anymore. So a lot of the women that come to me, I start by having it like a 90-minute session where we kind of get everything out on the table. It's the one time that the only time that I ask them to tell me exactly, if they can, what they've been through in their life. And it comes out, and it's done in a very held and safe way. But there's like this recognition then of, I have been through a lot, Helen, haven't I? And then I say, you do realize that what you've experienced is trauma, and I explain all the different aspects of it. And they're like, do you really think so? But I don't have it as hard as somebody else. I see other people, so there's this sense of even some of the worst things that I could possibly hear. And women will still say to me, oh, I don't know. I didn't realize that was trauma. you know,
Yeah.
or they've only just started to remember, you know.
Yeah.
And so there's this sense of, you know, having to acknowledge it now. And when you're able to acknowledge it, it's not about sitting with it. It's not about saying, right, you've acknowledged it, let's just deep dive even further and make it all, you know, nobody's into prodding the wound, and certainly I'm not. But you know, what you do is you in the acknowledgement, you give yourself some peace, because you know that it's not you, it's what's happened to
To
you, or
you.
for, and that change can happen.
Yeah.
Because I actually a guy I was working with sent me a message the other day, and he completed his program with me a little while ago now. It must be about 4 months or so. And he sent me a text message out of the blue the other morning, just saying, I want you to know I've got my mojo back. and life has never been better. And he said, it's completely, you know, working with you, and quote unquote, working with you has completely changed my life.
Yeah.
Where he was he thought that he couldn't do anything differently. He thought he also had to turn up and show up in particular ways as a man. And actually working with me, it was you know, it was a bit of a reality check too. But you know, what he was able to understand was that everything that he'd been through since childhood had affected how he was able to feel balanced and regulated in himself, and it had affected who he thought he needed to be.
Yeah.
And now he's him. now he's Andy.
Yeah.
And so it's an extraordinary journey, I think, that we all go on in any healing and recovery. And I always say it's not a destination, it's a journey.
It absolutely is. Yeah.
But it's a very empowering journey to go on.
Yeah, it absolutely is. And you know, like you say, it brings peace and freedom and liberation.
And words strike fear in people, because then they go, well, how do I know how to act when it's peaceful?
Yes. Oh gosh.
You want to feel liberated. What do I do now? You know, like you said, what do I do now?
Yeah. Now I know all this. Now who am I? Well, it's like, who am I now? Now I'm not. Now I'm not being driven by my trauma response, you know, and as much, you know, because it takes time. But you know, but I know about it. Who on earth am I now? And you know, that's when I started to realize that actually, you know, I'm all these other things.
All the other things, and they're beautiful things as
yeah
well.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I think just a couple more things actually I wanted to ask you about. You put a post on Instagram in October that was I mean, it's very much along the lines of what you've just been discussing actually. And you know, you said you get to define her and let her shine. And that really, I love it when I see something on Instagram, which isn't very often, but it just stops me in my tracks, you know. And I was like, yeah, you know, absolutely. And you know, you said, do you wonder if you'll ever recover, heal, feel differently, guiding others, but doing the work yourself, you know? And you were talking about yourself then. So you went from a quiet, underconfident little girl to anxious, bullied teenager to fearful young woman who survived, you know, varying relationships, to the woman you are now, which is vibrant, vivacious, calm, confident, courageous, compassionate, and funny, and fierce, as we've established today. And it's I mean, you've talked about the humor that you say some of your client, or the fun, and it's the fact it's your ability to be funny around all of this that actually really draws me to you as well, because it's life at the end of the day, isn't it? And this is kind of what ties in a lot with what I'm talking about now, that you know, yes, a healing journey can be tough at times, and there can be fun in it, and a humor along the way. But for me, ultimately, what has been at the end of my journey is joy. and finding joy in discovering who I actually really am now, and joy outside in everyday little moments. That is what has been the biggest gift. There's been lots of gifts, but that's been the biggest gift for me.
And that's an extraordinary gift to give yourself, you know. When I think about all the things I've described and what you've described, that kind of underconfident little girl, you know, the times that I felt the safest, if you like, was with myself. And so I was quiet, but that's actually because I also enjoyed my own company. And I still do. I actually love being with myself. I know, and the way that I see the world as well. You know, I have, I wouldn't say it's I mean, we all have a unique perspective, but the way that I see things, you know, the way that I can find humor in things, and I'm not saying I'm finding humor in trauma, okay? Because you know, but there's humor, there's playfulness in the relationship that you can have with me as a therapist or another therapist. But you know, what's unique about the relationship with me, I think that people have is the playfulness that we have together in that relationship, and that therapeutic relationship that brings out that joy, that brings out that freedom. And I think those kind of relationships are the most profound in terms of healing, that, you know, aren't going to happen in like a 4-week session, you know. It's not going to happen like that, you know. It happens in the building of that, in that playful and trusting relationship, because you get to be yourself. You get to show her, you get to let her shine in that relationship, and then you get to feel safe in that.
And for that reason, that's why you're not really going to find it in an online course either. You need to be in relationship and have that connection with somebody who is holding that safe space for you, and you know, who you can trust and feel safe with.
And you know, I know, you know, and there's a place for everything and everyone. I get that, you know, but and that's the way that it should be. But something generic, something that's self-led in a way, or something that, you know, is promising, you know, complete healing and recovery in like 4 weeks or 5 weeks, is, I'm sorry, it's just not going to do it. It will allow a little bit of something.
And it might be a start, I suppose.
It might be a start, but there's so much more beyond that. So much more. And you have to have that safe, playful, accepting, curious, empathic, compassionate relationship, trusting relationship with someone who's able to hold you in those painful moments.
I could not agree more. And like you say, you know, in that post that I was talking about, you say at the end, you know, that you know, that when you're talking about all the great things about that you say about yourself now, and you say, you know, she's in you too. You get to define her and let her shine. And this is the point that I love it. And when you allow her to shine, that is, I promise you, she's awesome.
Oh, she is.
She is. And she's in all of us.
And she's in all of us. Yeah. She is absolutely in all of us.
She is. And I think that's a really great place to end. Although I do have one more question, which I've asked everybody about joy, which is just generally, you know, where do you find your joy? What does joy mean to you? Can you just tell me a little bit about what joy means to you?
Oh God, here's another 20 minutes now.
Well, I know. Yeah, sorry. I'll just throw this little big question in at the end.
Little big question. What brings me joy? What brings me joy is actually feeling content in myself, you know, because there's enough chaos, you know. For me personally, obviously, you know, and professionally, you know, I absorb a lot of stuff. So when I'm able to just kind of feel content, so there's no expectation, that nobody's asking me to be anything. I'm not being that for other people. I'm just being me. So what brings me what brings me joy is actually being on my bed, reading my book with a cup of tea, with that's where I meditate too. So I meditate twice a day. But all of the other things that bring me joy are also about those really loving and happy relationships I have with other people. So, remember, my orbit is my circle. So what brings me joy is all the connections that I have with those people.
Yeah.
So the times where I get on a call with my friend Mandy or my friend Nicola, and we just spend like 2 hours talking about stuff. And then we're like, did we actually kind of come up with any solutions to it? No, we didn't. We just kind of just talked about stuff.
Yes.
So joy for me means safety. Joy for me means playfulness.
Yeah.
And it means, having the people in my life and connecting with them who actually just get me for who I am.
Lovely. Yeah. Thank you. So if anybody, feels inspired to get in touch with you and, thinks you might be able to help them, where can they find you?
There's several different ways. Obviously, Instagram. I'm Helen B. Ferguson on Instagram. Facebook, I've got 2. So I've got the business side of things, which is Helen Ferguson Therapy, and people can also connect with me on my personal profile, which is Helen Ferguson. They can find me on my website, helenbferguson.com, where they're able to book a call in with me. And if they're, I hope it's okay. I hope it's okay to share this, but I do actually have a free 7-day download that people can connect with, that starts them on their healing journey if they're not quite knowing where to start. So it's kind of unlocking that part of you, the compassionate and calm and confident part of you. So I have that free download, which is in the link in all my bios. So and I'm happy to share the link with you if you think it would be helpful for people to have. But those are all the ways. And then, obviously they can sign up to my newsletter, which goes out monthly, but I then in between have weekly emails that are inspiring.
They are. I get your weekly email and they are inspiring. I absolutely agree with you.
People can sign up to that on Instagram. On my Facebook, they can sign up to that as well. So it's the Rise Beyond Trauma newsletter and my weekly emails in between. So
amazing. I'll put all those links in the show notes as well. Yeah, lots of ways to find you. That's great. And I'll put all those links in the show notes. Helen, thank you so much for your time today. You have been awesome. You are fierce and fierce Ferguson. So
Ferguson, I'm going with that.
Yeah.
I think back to my mug thing, I probably need that on a mug.
I think you probably do need that on a mug somewhere. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. It's been a joy. This has been a joy.
This has been a joy for me too. Cool. Take care.
You too.
Thank you for listening to the Meeting of Minds podcast. You can find this podcast in all the usual places. Please tell your friends. Please subscribe. And if you have a moment, I'd be really grateful if you could rate and review, as it helps other people find us and helps me spread the messages of empowerment and positivity that I'm really passionate about. If you want to find out more about me, you can visit my website www.safeandsupported.co.uk. Until next time, bye.